I would have had 58 or 59, but there were just a number of Democrats that were determined that I not get a vote because they could see the same result. I would have been confirmed, principally Senator Dodd of Connecticut, who was upset that I'd said unkind things about Fidel Castro. Yes, ma'am, over here. Sure.
Please identify yourself.
I wanted to know if President Bush and Condoleezza Rice's minds have been co-opted by the State Department, which I hope you do.
Probably not if he reads this book. You know, I think one of the difficulties that presidents face, and I would say especially Republican presidents, is that in the State Department they see a bureaucracy that's very resistant to carrying out the policies that they want to carry out. And this is because of a cultural problem at the State Departments that has developed over the decades, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Clientitis, not knowing who you represent, not representing the U.S. effectively. Moral equivalency, not being able to distinguish, for example, between a terrorist attack on the one hand and a legitimate use of force and self-defense in the other. Mirror imaging, which is looking at a negotiator on the other side of the table and thinking they're the same as you, reasonable people looking for a solution. Of course, if the person on the other side of the table thinks you're a limp-wristed, weak-kneed representative of a morally degenerate society, you're probably not going to be able to reach accommodation with them very easily. So I think that it's not exactly a bell ringer of a campaign issue, but I think a cultural revolution at the State Department is critical to our national security, and I hope the next president and the next Secretary of State pay attention to it. It will not be changed overnight, but there are many very good public servants there who would respond in the right way to a cultural revolution, and we need to get it started sooner rather than later. And Ann, with your permission, maybe I'll just take one more question here. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that because of the way that Israel didn't win outright the war against Hezbollah last summer, that also might have had a negative impact on the relationship between the United States and Israel, and if so, in what way?
Well, I think that I can tell you from the perspective of what we faced in the Security Council during the 30-plus days after the first Hezbollah attack across the blue line and the Israeli response, that the initial policy of the U.S. government was to say we wanted not simply to have another Middle East ceasefire resolution. We wanted something that would fundamentally change the political dynamic in the region. And frankly, given the statements of the government of Israel, I would have to say up here in New York, I thought that Israel was going to eliminate the Hezbollah threat. That was the stated objective. So I was perfectly happy to sit there in the Security Council and stop presidential statements critical of Israel. I vetoed the first resolution critical of Israel. I ultimately got to veto two. One disadvantage of only being there 16 months is that was all I was able to do. But we could have held out for a lot longer had Israel been pursuing that as an objective. Now, I'm not saying that was necessarily the correct objective. If Israel had decided it was going to take a substantial chunk out of Hezbollah and declare that that was it for the present, that would have been a legitimate strategy as well. But the fact is that because the stated objective was not being pursued, the U.S. government eventually concluded that a ceasefire resolution was necessary, and that's why we ended up with 1701, which I thought at the time and I think today is a failed resolution. It is exactly what we said we didn't want when we started out. We said we didn't want another Middle East ceasefire resolution, and that's exactly what we ended up with. So I don't think that necessarily damages the ties between Israel and the United States, but it leaves both countries, relatively speaking, in a weaker position in the region. And it's one reason why I think if this Annapolis Peace Conference is to be held, unfortunately, it's going to result in not only will it result in no progress in solving the underlying problems, it will leave both the United States and Israel in a weaker position for having failed to do so. Thank you all very much. Very glad to be here.